All right, welcome back to another live with Diabetes 180. Today we're talking about the best foods to manage or control diabetes. So you're going to hear is probably going to be counter what you've been hearing or been told is good for diabetics because all the foods or many of the foods we're talking about actually are carbs, okay, rich in carbs. So just keep in mind on the Diabetes 180 channel, we promote a low fat, whole food, plant based diet. So the most important factor is making sure that our fat intake is low enough to promote insulin sensitivity. As we promote insulin sensitivity, we become more tolerant to carbs. So these foods, if you're eating them and you're experiencing spikes, so I'm gonna go ahead and spoil alert. Give you an example: beans. Every time I eat beans, my blood sugar spikes. Lewis doesn't know what he's talking about. That is because most likely you are still in a state of insulin resistance, right? Every time I eat oatmeal, my blood sugar spikes. That doesn't work. So again, the first and most important thing is to make sure we are eating in a low fat environment, making sure that our body has a low fat environment so that we can promote insulin sensitivity. I hope that makes sense. Please ask questions. That's what we're here for. As we go through these foods, the best foods for normalizing blood sugar levels. Okay. This is, again, like we always do, we're going to show evidence based research so that you can walk away informed and with a new food list. At the end of our live, we're going to give you an opportunity to receive a traffic light guide. So that will be an easy way to go shopping and knowing what to eat to promote diabetes reversal. So make sure you watch to the end. Our lives don't go very long, usually about 20 minutes, 30 minutes to max. I respect your time. I respect my time. So I try to make sure we are jam packing all relevant information in a short period of time. If you would like to greet us and let us know you're watching, because this is live, we're watching live right now. Let us know in the chat room where you are and who you are, and so that would be really cool. But of course, again, as we go through these foods, let us know if you have questions. So the first food we're going to talk about is oatmeal. Interesting enough, before the invention of insulin, uh, there were certain foods that were promoted for managing blood sugar levels, and one of those food groups were whole grains. So you would think, man, I thought whole grains are carbs. How were they using whole grains to manage people who had diabetes pre-insulin? And we're talking about as hundreds of years ago. We're talking about back into the Egyptian days. We have text from Egypt that described the diet that diabetics were put on. It was a diet consisting of whole grains, berries, and surprisingly honey, right? Which is sugar. So like, you're not, oh, that doesn't make sense. But again, it does make sense when we think about the root cause of diabetes being insulin resistance that happens because of too much fat in a diet. So it actually does make sense when you eliminate high fat foods and then go on a very low fat diet, which oatmeal has very low fat, if and close to none, right? When you're eating a diet consisting of only oatmeal for days, that your blood sugar is going to normalize. So this was actually a diet, a therapeutic diet that many physicians used before the invention of insulin, right? And insulin analogs, so that we can control diabetes with medications. So I know a lot of us watching this, we want to come off insulin. You want to reduce insulin at the very least. So, this is something I feel like you should know that before the invention of insulin, they were using oatmeal, okay, to control diabetes. This is something really interesting too. So there was actually a case study of a woman who was so severely hyperglycemic that she ended up in the ICU unit, right? So we know that hyperglycemia could lead to ketoacidosis and deadly state to be in. So this woman was in ICU getting tube feedings, and no matter what, they how or they applied or put into that tube feeding, her blood sugar stayed high, right? Following the normal diabetic recommendations of what they were blending and pureeing and providing her, uh, her blood sugar stayed in the 200s. It wasn't until they decided to go old school and give her oatmeal, right? Right, and so Let's see what happened after transitioning to a recommended diabetic diet in the ICU unit for this lady who has blood sugars on that won't can't stay under control after giving her oatmeal, right? And this is just after a few days, okay? It didn't take long. After they transitioned to oatmeal, this lady experienced 142 blood glucose drop, right? An average blood glucose levels on 160 less units of insulin. That is amazing. All right, think about it. But an average of 142 point drop in blood sugar level with 160 less. I should have said that she started off with 200 units, or on average of 200 units or more than 200 units of insulin per day. And after a few days of oatmeal, she went from 200 units to 160 less, just 42 units a day, right? While seeing a blood sugar drop. So, how many of you guys would love to experience normal blood sugar levels with less insulin? Right? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Okay. So that's something that we need to add to for sure to our diet. Blood sugar levels can be normalized. And again, it makes sense in the context of insulin sensitivity because when you go on to oatmeal, when you're eating oatmeal, you're eating very, very little fat, right? Even though it's a source of carbs. All right. So let's look at this next study. All right. Pull this up here. All right, someone put a comment here in the chat. Moringa, it really helps with diabetes. All right, thank you for sharing that. Actually, that's something I have never researched. So thank you for sharing. But I believe, and there's enough science to prove it that all, if not many or most, whole plant foods are going to be beneficial for diabetes. Okay, foods as found and as grown in nature from the plant kingdom. So, what about a study dedicated to oatmeal? All right. So let's see if the old school method of using oatmeal to control blood sugar levels works on a larger population. So in this study, they intervened the diet of diabetics, right, splitting them into two groups. Sorry, splitting them into a group that would be consuming just oatmeal, only oatmeal for 2 days. Okay, only oatmeal. So I believe in the study they used either water or vegetable broth, to provide it some. They might have added some vegetables. Of course, vegetables are very low in fat, just to give some variety. Maybe some herbs like cinnamon, which really doesn't add to the calories. So you end up with a very low calorie intervention, right? It's also very low in fat, and this is what happened after 2 days of oatmeal. Just 2 days of oatmeal. This is something I still don't understand. Like, this is crazy. 4 weeks later, the A1C dropped. Now think about that. Think about that. Just 2 days of eating nothing but oatmeal, and they had beneficial effects 4 weeks later. They rode the high of those fat lows for as long as 4 weeks, seeing normalized blood sugar levels or improved blood sugar levels to the point where the A1C dropped. This may seem too fantastic, right? But it does make sense because when you go on a very low fat diet, such as one who's eating nothing but oatmeal, what happens is any fat that's stored in your muscle, your liver, and that spills over to your pancreas, the cause of diabetes, gets suctioned out, right? When this happens, insulin becomes sensitive again. And now the next time you eat something that has carbs, your body becomes ready for it, right? It's primed to receive insulin and to let, like the key, unlocks the door, let the doors open for the sugar to leave the blood. So it makes sense. That actually makes sense. As fantastic as that those results sound. So I actually challenge you guys. Before we go further, how many of you guys think you could eat 2 days of oatmeal? Just 2 days of plain old. I would say plain old boring oatmeal, but for me, I've gotten to the point where I love it. I used to have to load up my oatmeal with sugar. I don't even need to do that anymore. Your taste buds can change, guys. Your taste buds can change. But let me know. You guys think you can be up to that challenge to eat oatmeal for 2 days, especially thinking about the benefits it could lead to. I mean, these people were probably eating, standard American diets, right? Not very healthy diets. And even after those 2 day intervention, after returning back to their normal diets, they still rode on the benefits of the 2-day oatmeal fast. So there's an idea there for you guys. Okay. I don't know if any of you are up for that challenge, but I challenge you 2 days of oatmeal. I mean, what do you have to lose? All right. There's so many other benefits to oatmeal itself, right? That we should be doing it, right? Rasta Pasta says I do that every day. Love it. Okay. All right. So let's look at something else that's good. All right. In the whole plant food world, let's see. So actually, this is actually another study. So just if you thought that this was a fluke, okay, another study on oatmeal, and where I believe, let me see if this. I think this was a randomized control trial again. So they decided to compare, basically diets and see what oatmeal does. In the group that had the oatmeal, they had a 40% reduction in insulin dose, and again, the same effect, normal blood sugars 4 weeks later, right? These studies will be in the description section if you guys want to look at them and try it later. Try to redo your own research, I should say. So what about the next food? The next food up is millet. All right, the next food up is millet. So millet, if you don't know, is a whole grain, right? So if you're thinking about things like rice, quinoa, millet, it's a grain like that. So you cook it just the same, maybe just takes a little longer. But millet has been shown to have very good beneficial effects when it comes to blood sugar control. And the reason this is I kind of tried to screenshot this here that we grabbed from nutritionfacts.org. Um, the effect of blocking starch. Okay, so there are certain foods like millet that actually can block starch digestion. How this works is when you're eating foods that have starch, normally, of course, there's a large amount that is digested that goes quickly into the blood, and if you have insulin resistance, can get trapped, right, as it turns into sugar. There are certain foods, especially vegetables and grains, that have a certain percentage of what's called resistant starch. That means the starch that's in them doesn't get digested. It bypasses, absorption and digestion and goes straight down to the intestines, which is good for our bacteria. It feeds our gut bacteria, so we have a good healthy microbiome because of these foods. But also importantly for diabetics, this leads to a slower digestion. So your foods go slower through your digestive tract. So the time from eating to sugar knocking on the door of your cell is prolonged, right? It's leading to a more gentle rise in blood sugar levels. And also, the blood sugar levels tend to improve when you have resistant starch because less of it is digested and less of it ends up in the blood at the end. So what millet benefit of millet is that it has a high amount of resistant starch. When you're looking at millet compared to wheat flour, for example, the percentage is not even close. Rice flour, wheat flour, and millet here at the top, 35.9% resistant starch versus just around 12 and 1 in rice. Right, so millet has a lot of this resistant starch, which is good. This is an interesting graph too. So this graph shows you a comparison, okay, of stomach emptying times. So stomach emptying, when you're looking at the rice, let me actually make the screen big so I can see it better. Rice, potatoes, and pasta. When you eat it, it takes about an hour to start start the process of emptying the stomach, right? And then another 2 to 3 hours to before half of it. That's the green. So the yellow is how long it takes to empty to start emptying the stomach, and the green is the half time, how long it takes for half of that food to now be emptied from the stomach. So comparing that to millet or sorghum, right? Another grain that has resistant starch. There's really not much of a comparison. You're talking about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours before it actually starts leaving the stomach, and another 5 hours before it's halfway digested or halfway emptied from the stomach. So you can imagine how good this is for weight management, right? Because then you're full longer when you're eating millet. You're again, much of that starch now is going to take a longer time to get broken down and end up in the blood. So this is why millet should be a part of our diabetes program, right? All right, this should be our plan. And yeah, Audrey, I've actually tried millet. A few months ago, I started cooking with it, and it's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Um, so it has kind of to me like kind of a nutty flavor. All right, let me see. Just always try to stop and look at any questions or anything I'm missing. Uh, so yeah, just see from Rasta Pasta. Never heard of millet. So yeah, it's a grain, whole grain, kind of like quinoa. You can find in most grocery stores, for sure. So if you look at, I've never not found it in shopping food your Walmart and Food Lion. So I'm sure you could find it in most grocery stores. And I see a comment, I can write down my grocery list by what you tell me. That way I can buy. Actually, yeah, at the end of our program tonight, we'll give you a good way to shop. So it's a traffic light guide. So I'll make sure to give you guys a screenshot so you can a QR code to screenshot or scan. Okay. If you don't have ability to scan the code, just let me know in the comments or maybe email me or DM me on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, I should say. So let's go on to another food that's good for diabetics. Okay. Or actually, no, another study then. Forgot this one. This is actually a study that compared 300 diabetics, and they split them into two groups. Okay. Both groups had a diabetic friendly meal. So American Diabetes Association recommendation for meals, except one group had about 1 to 3 cups of millet added to those meals, and another group didn't. So you have one group with no millet in their food, and another group with millet in their food. Same foods with the exception of millet. Okay, so if that makes sense. And 90 days later, the group that had millet added to their food experienced a significant drop in A1C from 8.37 to 6.77 in just in 3 months of just adding millet, right? So this could be something we can easily incorporate into our um, meals. You can mix things up, right? Now we got legumes. Now we could add legumes, eating legumes with the millet, right? After having oatmeal for breakfast, right? Legumes again is a great choice for diabetics. Okay, and it's actually kind of going back to what we said in the beginning. Before pre-insulin, legumes was actually one of the foods that were used to help control diabetes before insulin. So it has a lot of benefits. So when we say legumes, so we're talking chickpeas, um, split peas, lentils, beans, of course, all class of beans, kidney beans, pinto beans. These legumes are great for diabetics. Okay, so this is something that we need to, I would say for sure, should have every day, at least once a day. Okay. I know I always hear people say, but beans make you toot, right? And I don't want to be gassy all day. It does get better when you first transition to a plant-based diet and you're eating more fiber and especially more beans. What's happening is your gut bacteria is changing because your body's like, oh, what's going on? Like, we're not used to this fiber. We're not used to these beans. So your gut bacteria changes, and as it changes to and transition to a healthier microbiome, you'll have less gassy symptoms. Okay, so just be patient. Probably try to increase your consumption of fiber or beans slowly over time. But yeah, I eat beans regularly, and so this and many people agree. That if you're eating it consistently long enough, you're not going to have a gassy problem. But legumes is great for a couple reasons. Number one, it has what we call the resistant starch, the starch that resists digestion. So when you're eating it, some of it ends up in the colon, feeding our healthy bacteria. Another reason why fiber and fiber-rich foods are good in this context is because of estrogen. So this is probably something a lot of us don't know about the connection between estrogen and diabetes. And this is something, whether you're a female or male, you should be concerned about. So so the fat that we have in our body stored in our organs or outside of organs actually can produce estrogen, right? This is why people who are obese tend to have higher estrogen levels, even if you're a man, and higher estrogen and low testosterone. The good thing about fiber is that it helps to pull some of the estrogen out from your intestines into your stool. All right. Not only that, but it also changes, like we just said, changes your microbiome, because one of the other sources of estrogen is your gut bacteria. So there are certain gut bacteria that produce what's called diabetogens, or diabetes causing compounds or estrogens. And when you eat a whole food plant-based diet rich in fiber, you're actually changing the gut bacteria, you're changing your microbiome environment to one that produces less estrogen. Okay, so which is again good for diabetes. So legumes, and this is why, there's not just one thing reason why these foods are good. These foods are packaged with so many different compounds and components that make them healthy, right? But legumes definitely should be a part of a healthy diabetes regimen. Hey, Rashida says hello. She says, I so want to go back to being whole food plant based. I love that. Please do. You see, even if your doctor's scaring you, all right, it's just unfortunately that many of our physicians don't know. We're not educated on the benefits of it. So, it's not because they don't care or they're, willfully ignorant. It's just not part of their education. That's why we got to educate ourselves. I remember actually, this is another thing too. Like, I remember hearing, if your doctor always has the answer, if your doctor never says, well, you know what, I don't know, I need to look into that, run. Okay, because all of us are ignorant when it comes to something. So, unfortunately, many of us, when we have the lab coat, we think that we're infallible, like the Pope, right? And nothing I say can be wrong. I'm smarter than Google. Um, but we got to be humble as providers. So this is a reminder to our providers or healthcare workers out there: be humble. It's okay to say I don't know, right? So, but unfortunately, some people just feel like they do have all the answers. That I don't excuse. But so legumes should be good. And if you want to compare as far as which legumes are better than others, they're all good. But this is a study that compared bean and rice meals to rice alone, right? And the subsequent blood sugar spike, right? The blood sugar response. So white rice alone, of course, had the highest blood sugar response, having no beans. When they added kidney beans, blood sugar response was better. When they added black beans, better. Pinto beans, best. So if you're going to choose beans, black beans and pinto beans did better over time compared to kidney beans. This is because, again, when you look at it and study it, kidney beans have less of that resistant starch. All right, so that's why there's a difference. But of course, it's still better than just rice alone. So next up is flaxseed. That definitely deserves very honorable mention. So flaxseed and the next food group that we're going to describe is beneficial for a lot of reasons. Again, it has a good source of fiber. Flaxseed has a wide variety of antioxidants. So I call them the disease-fighting chemicals that help promote reduction of inflammation, reduction in insulin resistance, right? Weight loss, cholesterol improvements, blood pressure improvements. So, there's so many benefits to flaxseed. I actually I recommend all my clients take at least a tablespoon every day of flaxseed. Okay. So you should be having that too. So this is a study that I did find. So just a tablespoon of ground flaxseed in just 1 month time led to a significant drop in blood glucose, triglycerides, that's a measure of cholesterol, and A1C. Okay. So so this is so important. Hey, Dylan, thanks for joining. Your question is if I'm a dietitian or nutritionist. I'm a PA, family medicine physician assistant. However, I am self-taught when it comes to nutrition. So I do not have a nutrition license or dietitian license. I just have, for the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, been pouring into the literature when it comes to, and studies when it comes to whole plant food benefits on diabetes. So I self-proclaimed diabetes specialist on reversal. So on whole food plant-based diets. But by profession, I'm a family medicine physician. Thank you so much for asking that. All right. Um, but again, humble enough to say when I don't know something, right? So, I'm definitely humble enough to say when I don't know something, right? But one thing I do know is that we've been by God's grace successfully helping people reverse their diabetes for the last 3 years, who go through our coaching program with the same approach. I use the same approach for everybody. Of course, the results vary based on how well you stick with the plan, but everyone gets results who sticks with a low fat, whole food, plant based regimen. All right. So Let's go ahead and look at the last honorable mention, I believe. Actually, there's two. The next one is second to last is cruciferous vegetables. So those are your things like broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. Okay, I believe beets is also cruciferous, and no, I don't believe beets are. But yeah, there's a wide variety, Swiss chard, bok choy, that are cruciferous vegetables. Again, I kind of compare them to the flaxseed. It's not just one thing that makes them good for blood sugars. It's because they have a wide variety, a big profile of disease-fighting antioxidant chemicals inside them that help reduce inflammation, reduce insulin resistance, help lower blood pressure, help prevent cancer. So cruciferous vegetables have actually been very, very highlighted for their ability to help reduce and prevent cancer rates. So this is because of sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is a specific compound we've talked about in your cruciferous vegetables like broccoli. This is why if you're preparing your broccoli or any of these vegetables, you want to practice what's called the chop and hold method. So the problem is if you just take it raw and cook it, it destroys the ability of an enzyme to produce sulforaphane. And so what you want to do is you want to cut it and let it sit for about 40 minutes before cooking. All right. So, or if you don't have the time to cut and hold it, something very simple is adding mustard, a ground mustard. So, if you add another cruciferous vegetable, like or source of cruciferous vegetable, like mustard, you could actually activate the enzyme that produces sulforaphane. So, either chop or hold it, or add ground mustard, right, to your vegetables, your cruciferous vegetables, so you can get this very, very potent, powerful antioxidant sulforaphane. Okay, so that's that. All right, I don't know if there's any studies on sulforaphane in diabetes specifically, but it has so many other benefits, right? And lastly, we have berries. And so berries, of course, again, falls into special mention because it's so rich and diverse in nutrients. When it comes to antioxidant power, berries are usually on the top, like right after herbs and spices. You got berries, right? So great source of nutrition. But for this actually does have a very direct result in blood sugar levels because berries have a high percentage of resistant starch that actually blocks digestion. And so that if you mix it and pair it, like say with your oatmeal or other foods, any foods, you're actually kind of allowing that starch resistance to help lower your blood sugar levels. So definitely recommend berries of all sorts and all varieties in your daily diet. All right. So that's all we got as far as our foods. So yeah, Dylan says I would really dig the no lab coat required channel. I'll check that out. No lab coat required. I'll try to remember that. All right. Okay. And Rashida says, I know originally the blood sugar will go up when you change your diet, but how long does it take to start going down? That depends on number of factors, what diet you're starting on. So how much fat was in your diet prior to changing? How much fat is on the body, how overweight we are. So basically, also other factor, huge factor is how long you've been diabetic. I've normally seen those who are most resistant, those who are checking every of those boxes, right? And transitioning, it could take probably into the second month. I would say 6 to 8 weeks on average when people are really sticking with it, 6 to 8 weeks. For now, let me preface this that 6 to 8 weeks to have it really normal. Prior to the 6 to 8 weeks, way before that, you're gonna see it dropping. It's gonna look like a stock. I like to say a stock market. It starts up like somewhere right here, and then it kind of goes down like this, right? So it's going up and down, but over time, as long as you're tracking the trend, you're seeing that there's going to be more ups and downs, more downs and ups. Okay. So yeah, just think of a stock market graph. At first, you'll see some spikes for the first few days, but stick with it. Over several weeks, you'll start to see the trend is coming down. All right. And then eventually it's like boom, it just it stays down. Because what's happening is that fat that's in those tissues takes time to burn off. Right. We have to realize that's a factor, and insulin resistance itself can take up to a decade to develop into full-blown diabetes. So it's not going to go overnight. Be patient, Rashida. It may take days for some weeks, but be consistent, right? Track your numbers, track your fat intake, and make sure your intake is at no more than 15%, ideally 10. And you're going to be on track to make sure you're off medicine soon, right? Or reducing it at the very least. So, that's all the time we're going to take for tonight. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining and watching us. Oh yeah, let me not leave out the last part. So this would be a traffic light guide. Okay, so if you have an ability to scan the QR code, scan it. It's going to give you a list, a food list, basically of green light foods, foods you can eat with no limit, yellow light foods, foods to eat in moderation, and red light foods, foods to avoid and stop buying. Okay, so you'll have to, if you don't have the ability to scan the code, maybe screenshot it, scan it later. But if you can't, just reach out to me, DM me, and I can send you the list. Okay. All right. Yeah, Rashida, let's have a meeting for sure. We have in our show notes a consultation link, and every show note should have a link for free consultation so we can talk. All right, and see how we can help you. So, as always, beloved, I pray above all things you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. We'll see you next week, Monday, same time, 7 p.m.